Back? Oh, damn, scared myself.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. All right, last session. I know everyone's tired, and we are running practically about 50 minutes, no, 20 minutes behind schedule. Or am I lying to myself? No, we're not. We're actually on time. We're good on time. You can wait another 5 minutes if you want to start on time on the dot, or we can keep going. Let's keep going, right? Just making sure everyone's here. Let me just double check. Tandi's here, Uyanda's here, and Koli and Tandi and Uyanda. Okay, cool. Great. All right, so our next session, which is session 4, is Advancing Information Integrity through the ACHPR resolutions. Did I say that right? Yes, I did. Great. So for this presentation, let me call up Tandi Smith, who's the Head of Programs at Media Monitoring Africa. There's a 1 second delay.
Yeah. Okay. Not going yet.
Do you want to? Yeah, I can. Did we switch things around? Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry, Tanya, about that. So please feel free to take a seat. I'll call you up. All right, so this is the last session of the day, the graveyard session, right? But yeah, thank you for staying right to the very end. It's only the brave, bold, and beautiful who do that. I see somebody who can relate there at the back. All right, so this is the session that is focusing on the African Commission on Human and People's Rights resolutions. So in March this year, the Commission adopted 2 resolutions. One is Resolution 630, the other one is Resolution 631. Resolution 630 focuses on platform accountability, and it is led by Media Monitoring Africa. Resolution 631 focuses on public service content, and it is led by the SOS Coalition. So this session is very different from what we had earlier. It is a consultative session on behalf of the African Commission. So what MMA and SOS do, they are the implementing bodies. They are supporting the African Commission to fulfill its mandate that has been given to the Special Rapporteur to conduct broad continental consultations to understand what information integrity should look like in the current age, but to also understand what public service content should look like in the current age. So what we have been doing over the past few months is conducting consultations on the continent. We have been targeting continental conferences. We've been targeting regional organizations, trying to get their input on what should be contained in the guidelines. So I'm just giving a brief overview, but we'll get into the nitty-gritties of what each resolution talks about and what kind of input we really seek to ensure that the guidelines that are being developed are broad enough, but also very useful to ensure that information integrity is advanced in the digital age. So without a waste of time, so in fact, before I call Tandi, I would like to just briefly explain how this session is structured. We are going to have presentations. So one is going to be on Resolution 630. That will be done by Tandi Smith, who is Head of Programs at Media Monitoring Africa. And for Resolution 631, we will have Olile Vundla, who is the Chairperson of Animation South Africa, and he'll be presenting on Resolution 631. So after that, what we'll do is we'll break into groups. so that we can have the group discussions. Because, like I said, it's a consultative session, so we want to hear from you, hear what some of your inputs are, so that they can be factored into, these guidelines. And it's very important to ensure that, as much as we are consulting on the continent, but also we are consulting locally, so that, because the contexts are different, so it's important that, the South African landscape is also, factored into these guidelines. So we'll break into those groups for about 30 minutes. And then after that, we won't have plenary, but we'll have a panel session where the group leaders, those that will be leading discussions in these groups, can then have an opportunity to give us feedback, but in a panel format. And then we'll open up the floor for those who have questions, but I don't think there'll be many questions because everybody would have given input, but we'll still have that opportunity towards the end of our session. So I do realize that it is a Friday afternoon, so we'll definitely try to keep to the time. So with that said, Thandi, over to you.
Right, thanks very much. Let's just fix this. Perfect. Thanks very much, Oyanda. So in the interest of time, what we're going to do is just briefly go through some of the key topics, key issues that the two different resolutions have, just to give you a bit of a better insight into what we're actually looking at. There'll be a QR code at the end of the presentation or at the end of the slides where you can access the resolution just to familiarize yourself with it. And as Oyanda said, during the feedback, during the interactive session that we're going to have shortly, there'll be some guiding questions around the specific input that we are looking for. So that is what you can expect. Next slide, please. So just to give an overview of the Resolution 630, resolution on developing guidelines to assist states monitor technology companies in respect of their duty, thank you, their duty to maintain information integrity through independent fact-checking. So essentially that is what the resolution targets. There are 4 key areas: responsibility of technology companies, independent fact-checking, human rights, impact assessments, and guideline development. Drilling down into the responsibility of technology companies, we want to look at how the concerns that the resolution has around regressions by tech companies on information integrity and protecting freedom, protecting expression and access to information. So essentially it's looking at how we have seen the platforms over the years completely regress in terms of their approach to protecting free speech and access to information. We also, the resolution also emphasizes that platforms must ensure full content moderation across African languages. We know that the issue of African languages and platform moderation, content policies, fact-checking, and the issues around algorithms and platform accountability, when we look at African languages, there are huge gaps in that area. And then that being supported by human oversight and adequately trained AI. We're not going to get that right if we don't address the issue of incorporating African languages. The resolution also warns against treating community-sourced community notes as a substitute for corporate responsibility or independent fact-checking. So it's one thing for the platforms to come out and promote the concept of community notes, but we know that that doesn't work, and it does not replace the responsibility and accountability of the platforms to address the issues. Looking at independent fact-checking, the resolution underscores the critical role of independent fact-checking in maintaining information integrity. Community notes, as mentioned, we know are insufficient on their own and can be taken over, can be manipulated, and can be shaped into a narrative by those who are posting community notes. And there's not a sort of baseline or set standard around a human rights approach to community notes. Resolution also talks about platforms amplifying verified content, properly integrating fact-checking into moderation systems and supporting independent fact-checkers. One of the sort of arguments, or one of the approaches that we've looked at, is the concept of de-incentivizing harmful content like disinformation. And so that touches on the opposite, or on the other end of that, on amplifying verified content. Human rights impact assessments. So the resolution calls on digital companies operating in Africa to conduct transparent human rights impact assessments as part of due diligence, and particularly should be conducted before major platform changes, algorithm updates. We know and we've heard that Meta has just announced that they are going to start with their, how would you call it? I'm trying to think of the technical appropriate words, but using the information that is being fed into their AI systems, using that information to actually now tailor even deeper, more personalized, targeted advertising. And I wonder how many people who get excited about using Meta AI on their platforms, really understood the consequences of what that information and what that data is going to be used for. So just talking about a human rights approach to these changes before just implementing algorithmic updates, and especially in areas or events or scenarios where we're dealing with high-risk issues like elections, health emergencies, conflict zones, ensuring that there is a human rights impact assessment and due diligence is critical. And they must align with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And then lastly, guidelines development. So this is just giving a bit more of a practical insight into the process. And Uyanda's already touched on some of these points, but the resolution mandated the Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression and access to information in Africa to develop these guidelines. And it's particularly important that the guidelines are developed in collaboration with various state parties, civil society, regulatory bodies, and technology companies. And this is exactly what we are trying to do. Every opportunity that there is, we are holding consultations and sessions and information sessions like this to get as much collaboration and input and participation from people who are able to impact and influence the development of these guidelines. Key focus area of the guidelines will be platforms, performance on information integrity, role and scope of independent fact-checking, and ensuring broad African representation in language, culture, and context. And so you can scan that QR code to access the Resolution 630. And as I mentioned, there will be guiding questions when we go into discussions, which will just help shape the conversation, and really looking forward to your input. Thank you.
All right, afternoon everyone. So I'm going to talk about the public service component, which is Resolution 630. Um, in essence, what has happened is there's been a special rapporteur that's been appointed to engage with us around this, and their mandate is really just to solicit views that can be incorporated into their planning processes and the policies or recommendations that will be put forward. And yeah, that is essentially what the rapporteur's role is, and we obviously then step in there. All right, so in terms of the focus, it's really around democratizing public service content. Public service content could be considered to be a subset of public interest content, and part of that is because you have a whole lot of online services that are appearing, and that's where a lot of people are getting their information from all these digital platforms. And within that context, what does public service content mean? If that content is not going to be coming from the likes of an SABC or any other sort of public institutions, I think if you look at how the younger generations are consuming content, their, let's call it, trusted sources of information are not necessarily what has been the traditional sources of trusted information. So yeah, so the landscape is changing, and how we treat public service content is going to be quite important. I mean, we are in the information age. If we don't have or aren't able to provide the tools that, you know, equip the younger generations, then we have a very big problem. Okay. So in terms of the key points, as I said earlier, public service media has really been, you know, sort of the preserve of your public service entities. And unfortunately, the footprint of the likes of an SABC is becoming smaller, or comparatively smaller to what's happening in the online world. So that is obviously a challenge. In terms of the online platforms which are publishing a lot of information, we need to have better mechanisms to hold those platforms accountable. As Thandi, oh, I don't know if it was Thandi who mentioned it, but yes, the platforms do have, you know, their certain rules like 3 strikes, etc., etc. But they have a very laissez-faire sort of approach to how they deal with it. It's like, you know, a tick box exercise, and not necessarily about ensuring that the information that out there is correct. Thandi also mentioned the algorithms. I think that's quite important. What do the tech platforms do in terms of directing traffic towards public service content, or content that is of value to the consumers, to the public, as opposed to redirecting them to content that could possibly generate economic returns for the platform through advertising, etc. So that's something else that needs to be considered. What I mentioned earlier, that the creators of public interest content or public service content are no longer just the public broadcasters. What does that mean in a landscape where a lone creator is in a position to actually create content that is of value? And I guess the question then becomes how you actually navigate that landscape, because if you're going to look at things like free carry for that content, how do you actually enable that if the content is coming from multiple sources, right? Yeah, I've actually sort of already sort of gone into this point around production and distribution. But yes, this is a very important point because in terms of the production, a state broadcaster like SABC could be subsidized to create content. What happens in the instance of a independent creator who wants to create content but doesn't have the financial resources? How do you create an equitable sort of playing field in that regard? So in conclusion, Resolution 631 is really taking cognizance of the new landscape that we're moving towards, but still trying to maintain the importance of public interest content or public service content so that no one is left behind. And essentially the process SOS is going through is to ensure that we have an optimum kind of approach to ensuring that this content still is prevalent in the new digital landscape. And I guess we'll get your inputs in the next session where we have a bit of a workshop just to get feedback. So yeah, I'll stop there, and that's the QR code. All right, Uyanda.
So thank you very much to Tandy and Xolile. So we are now going to break into our groups, and I'd like to urge you to join a group where you think you will be able to contribute the most. You know, it's one is tech platform accountability, one is public service content. So unfortunately, we don't have enough time. Otherwise, we would have, you know, halfway through the conversation rotated, so that, you know, each group has got a fair chance of getting input from the different experts in the room. But please, Resolution 630 is going to be on the left-hand side, my left-hand side. That one there. Resolution 631 is going to be this group. So if we could please just try and form a circular arrangement so that we're able to have these discussions. So the questions, I think just to try and avoid wasting time, I'm not going to read through those questions, but before we start in our groups, the group leader will kind of explain and frame the conversation so that we're able to engage. But these are the questions for each of the resolutions. Yes, so please, we can start going to the side that we want to be part of. And we will have 30 minutes for this discussion. 6:31, please follow Tandy. Amber, no. 6:30, please follow Tandy. 6:31. Yes. So thank you very much for being part of those group discussions. I am now going to call up the panel so that we can start with the engagement. So unfortunately, Tandy has had to leave, but we have got Tino Tenda, who is going to be representing Media Monitoring Africa. If you could please come forward, and Xolile, if you could also please just come forward as we move to wrap up. So we've got 30 minutes for this discussion. How do I sit on these chairs? Yeah.